Hi, kia ora, good evening. Just a quick message. You're not going to believe what happened to me today. If ever I needed a sign that I was on the right track, I got it today. So I'm just taken aback by it because I knew as soon as I shut the door, I've made the right decision. I'm heading in the right direction. So what happened was I got my shopping delivered today, this morning, not long after I made my last live. And the young boy that delivered my shopping said to me, have you got a busy day today? And I said, no, I'm just writing. And he goes, oh, what's the day like today? He said, there's really nothing you can do but stay indoors. And I said, oh, I'm writing movie scripts and, like game scripts and musicals and that, because I'm getting ready to leave. And he goes, oh, you're leaving, are you? And I said, yeah, I'm getting ready to move to America. I said, I'm looking to go to New York and set up in New York. And he goes, what did he say? Oh, he said something like, so when are you going, or are you looking to go soon or something? And I said, I'm just waiting for some legal stuff to get wrapped up. I said, and then as soon as all my legal stuff is wrapped up, I'm out. And he goes, oh, these things always take so long, and it's always the worst part of moving to a different country and that. And I said, yeah. I said, but I'm building a creative arts school. And he goes, oh, that sounds interesting. And I said, yeah, I'm gonna be. I said, I've been writing a lot of horror movies, and I've been writing a lot of scripts for video games. And I said, I'm writing musicals and operas and all that. And he goes, oh, it sounds like you've been really busy. And I said, yeah. I said, we've got a lot to do because it's basically like our schoolwork. It's what they're going to be doing for schoolwork. And he goes, any of them horrors? And I said, well, I said, I'm doing a lot of horror. I said, because obviously I'm going to be having festivals. And when we have Halloween, we have a Halloween festival. So we're going to have our horror movies. And I said, I'm going to have a little theatre so people can come and watch the horror movies and that. And he said, oh, I don't like horror movies. He said, but I like to play video games. He said, are any of your video games horrors? And I said, one of them kind of technically, as I said, it's called The Soul Collector. And I said, she works for the Ministry of Souls. Hang on. So I'm trying not to, because I've just eaten. I said, and she goes around collecting all the souls of serial killers and murderers and that who hadn't been caught in the past, and she brings them to justice. And I said, I said, that's not going to be a pleasant game. And he goes, no, I don't like horrors in games. And I said, well, then you'd like the Quantum Menace. I said, that's going to be like our version of, Marvel and DC comics. And he sort of looked at me and he goes, really? And I said, yeah, it's like a superhero one. I said, but it's our version. I said, and then he said to me, I said, but it's a creative art school for children. I said, we're going to get children in from all over the world. And I said, we're going to have our version of Doctor Who called The Time Jumping Detective. And I said, we're going to have our version of Harry Potter called The First Sign. And he goes, oh my God. He said that like that just sounds amazing. And when you get the feeling like when someone wants to talk and they don't want the conversation to end and they're just standing there looking at you. And I said to him, well, look out for us. And he goes, well, if I don't see you again after this, I just want to wish you the best of luck. He said, because it sounds like you've got an incredible curriculum for these kids and they sound so lucky. And I said, well, I said the movies and that, I said everything that they'll be doing is their curriculum. I said that's why I have to give them lots of schoolwork for. I said, you know how you have a lot of these misfits who are seen as weird and a bit odd and different, and they're bullied and they're not treated very well. I said, they're all creative kids with special writing talents, or they're artists or musicians and that. And I said, basically, I'm going to be taking them and giving them projects to do. I said, so, in the future, I said, we're going to be all over the media, all over social media. I said, so look out for Faea, Faea. I said, and my name's Debbie. And I said, it stands for the Foundation Arts and Entertainment Academy. I said, so look out for us. And he goes, oh, he said, I definitely will. And he goes, so have you got help doing this, or is other people helping you do this? And I said, no, I've done it all on my own. And he goes, you're kidding. He said, you've done all that on your own. And I said, yeah. I said, I've written it all myself. I said, it's my business. It's my enterprise. It's my thing. And it's all, I'll be running it. I'll own it. I've written everything. Like I said, it's all mine. And he goes, wow. He goes, that just sounds amazing. And he said, I'm going to have to keep an eye out for you. He said, because he said, this just sounds incredible. And he just, when I mentioned about the video games, about the Quantum Menace, as soon as I said, I said, you might like our version of Marvel and DC Comics. That's the Quantum Menace. I said, ours is called the Quantum Menace. He sort of did a double take and looked at me with wide eyes, like, oh my God, like he found the Holy Grail. Like you almost heard his brain go, oh. And I thought, oh, I'm onto something. In that moment between us, I knew I'd hit the nail on the head with something, and it was like I felt like it was a sign from the universe to say you are absolutely 100% heading in the right direction. That's like 4 times now I've gotten signs from people that I'm absolutely heading in the right direction, and the stuff I'm writing and creating for it. Like when I said to him about, the time jumping detective is our version of Doctor Who, and I said, and the first sign is our version of Harry Potter. I said, so, watch out for them. And he said, I absolutely will. He said that this just sounds absolutely amazing. And he said, and I'll be sure to listen out for you. And I knew there and then I'd gotten a sign. When he looked at me, his eyes just widened and he just looked stunned. And then the fact as well that I had done it all myself. And then because remember I tweeted about, I'm proud of how I've done all this myself. He was just like, wow, what a curriculum for these kids. And because then I said to him, when I was telling him about the first sign and all of that, I said, some of it is occult based, and I said because I'm trying to teach people the in a lot of stuff that I've written, the right way and the wrong way to see the occult. And he goes, now that sounds, that sounds something I'd be interested in, or that sounds right up my street or right up my alley or something like that. And he goes, that sounds amazing. He said, I'm going to have to remember you. And I said, just look out for me. I said, because once I get to America, I'm going to be all over social media, all over the media, because, looking for talent, looking for stuff, that sort of thing. I said, so Fiea. I said, my name's Debbie. And he goes, he was trying to linger at the door. Like I felt like he wanted to ask me 1,000 million questions, but obviously, they have an allotted time. They have to sort of be in and out within like 10 minutes, I think it is. And he was walking down kind of scratching his head like, what the hell did I just encounter? And I knew by his reaction, and he would have only been in his early 20s, because obviously he's one of my target audiences. I knew that I'd blown his mind. I knew the way he sort of looked at me and his eyes widened, and he just sort of stared with that paused look on his face like, whoa. Like I'd just introduced him to something brand new, and I knew that he wanted to ask me more questions. I even thought it wouldn't surprise me if I got a knock on the door at some point when he wasn't at work. Can I ask you questions about your games? That's what it felt like he didn't want to leave. And as soon as I mentioned the Quantum Menace, I said, because he goes, I don't like, he said, I like video games, but I don't like horrors. And I said, well, then you might like the Quantum Menace. I said, it's our version of DC Comics and Marvel, our superheroes and that. And as soon as I said the Quantum Menace and DC Comics and that, like his whole face just lit up. Like, wait, what? Like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, seriously, it's like when I opened the door to receive my shopping, it's like in return he received the Holy Grail of entertainment. No, I said, the first sign is our version of Harry Potter. I said, but everything in it is real. I said, all like the science and stuff in it is real. And he goes, real. And he goes, oh, really? And I said, yeah. I said, because I'm an occult physicist. And he goes, oh, wow, really? And I said, yeah. I said, a lot of stuff I write, I'm trying to teach people, the right way to understand how the occult works and that. And he goes, now that sounds like more up my, or that sounds right up my alley, or that sounds like my cup of tea. I can't remember what he said, but he was basically saying, now that is cool. And I knew when I shut the door and I came back in the flat and, put the shopping bags up, I was putting my shopping away and I just thought, I just got a sign from the universe that not only am I heading in the right direction, but people are ready to and going to love what it is that I'm writing. I'm writing stuff that is getting people excited because I'm old school and I'm not woke and there's no DEI and yeah, I'm a writer and I'm a woman and I'm doing all this stuff in games and movies and I have no experience, but I'm going to have the money to get the right people put in the position so that I just hand them the assignments and then they make it happen so that I can, not too much pressure, put too much pressure on my stomach and I get to be with my family and hopefully, God willing, have a baby. And I really want to have another baby. But yeah, it's like young people especially and people of my generation are really, really receptive to what it is that I'm creating because the younger generation are kind of wanting to be a part of what my generation grew up with and experienced. Apparently, a lot of Gen Zs in that are quite envious of us Gen Xers because of, we grew up in the best time for movies and books and we were there at the start of video games and we got to see the best of everything in entertainment and they don't have that luxury anymore. That their generation down don't have that luxury that us Gen Xers had, except now I've come along and I've said I'm writing this, I'm creating this, we're doing this, we're doing that, blah blah blah, and people are like, whoa, like how can I be a part of it? That's what he said. He said something like, oh, I might need to go over to see it and be a part of it or something. And I said, well, keep an eye out for us. I said, because as soon as I get there, we're going to be all over the media. Because that's what I was saying. Like, I'm going to be looking for kids. I'm going to be looking for staff. I very nearly said to him, if you think you've got a talent that we could use, I very nearly said to him, when I'm ready to start applying, putting it out there to look for staff, why don't you apply? Because I knew by his body reaction, by the way he was looking at me, the way his eyes went wide, the way his mouth dropped open, the way he kept going, whoa, and not wanting to leave and trying to linger around the conversation and just sort of standing there. I knew he had something he wanted to say. I knew he had questions, but because they have to be in and out under a certain time, it's like he didn't have time. But I think if I had been his last drop, before, you know, he got to go home, we'd probably still be standing talking at the door. He was so taken by it that it was like I knew I was drawing him in, to the point where he made the comment about, you know, I might need to come to New York and check it out. And I just thought, this is a sign. I've just gotten a massive sign from the universe that me going to New York and everything that I'm creating, the first sign. Oh, I told him about the Amber Rose. I said, you know, making our animated movie, the Amber Rose. I said, which is our version of like a Disney movie. What else? I told him about Quantum Menace, Time Jumping Detective, the first sign. I think that's all I told him about. But even just with what I told him about, he just stood there with his mouth open. It was almost like I felt like I was finally giving him something in a video game, something in a movie that was new and different and exciting and everything that he was looking for, everything that he loves. He even said, "Now that's right up my, or that's right up the thing, right in with the things up my street," or something like that. And I've just, my mind has been reeling about it all day. I just keep getting sign after sign after sign after sign that I'm heading in the right direction. I feel like I'm sitting in an airport getting ready to fly out, to be honest. I feel like I'm so far out of the in-between now that I can almost see the New York skyline in my ahead of me. I can almost smell the hot dog stands, and it reminds me of that Starman dream I had. New York, when, remember when the Blue Dragon came up out of the grates in New York and he said, New York's got your back no matter what. So, unbelievable. I'm getting more and more and more excited. I feel like I've got one foot out the door, and as soon as my other foot is out the door, like I'm going to be there like overnight or something. But I just got a massive sign from the universe. His reaction was unbelievable and unexpected, and he was so lovely and so gracious and so taken back and so supportive. And he didn't even flinch or batter an eyelid when I said to him what it was I was creating and that I was an occult physicist. He was just like, oh my God. I knew he did not want to leave. So that's made my day. But between that and being able to eat stuff with gluten again, and it's not giving me a reaction, it's like it's been an incredible 24 hours. Yeah, he's absolutely made my day. Wonderful guy, wonderful kid. So now if I ever had doubts before, I don't have them anymore. Because when I thought I was going to Canada, I didn't get that kind of feedback. When I thought I was going to Russia, when I thought I was going to Switzerland, I never got any kind of supportive feedback. As soon as I put my sights on America, I was getting all that feedback in LinkedIn, and now I'm getting all this feedback from people in my life, and people are seeing it, and people can see it. It's like they can see it all coming into view, and now they're like, I want to be a part of this, or if I can't be a part of it, I need to support this woman. I need to keep an eye out for this woman. He said, I will definitely be keeping an eye out for you. I said, just let me get there and I'm going to be all over social media and the media. I said, because I need to be, putting out jobs for staff and kids. I said, so just remember my name, Debbie, and it's Faea, Faea, I said, and it stands for the Foundation Arts and Entertainment Academy. He said, I absolutely 100% will. So he'll be able to say, hey, I delivered groceries to that woman when he sees me on telly. That's the woman I was telling you about, the one that was going to make that Quantum Menace game. It's just read the Quantum Menace. Our version of Marvel and DC Comics, I said the Quantum Menace, and his eyes just went poof. So I've got to spring in my step today because I'm a new Sainsbury's fan. So I'm going to go. I'll speak to you later. Ka kite. Anō.